Hi there, everybody. Sorry for a slightly delayed live stream. We've had a bit of technical hiccups on my side this week. So welcome to Associated Studios Industry Talks with me, Scott Harrison, as always. And this week, I am so excited about this one. Any of my students know how incredibly important I know the lyrics and the words and the writing and the storytelling is to what it is that we do. And I'm getting to talk to somebody that is one of my heroes, actually. I'm going to say that because actually just such consistently awesome writing. We have the amazing Anthony Drewe with us, and I've just realised it says Mark Hedges, so I'm going to change that because you're not Mark Hedges. That was last week. You are definitely not Mark Hedges. We're just going to change that. There we are. Done. Lovely. Okay, so we've got the awesome Anthony Drewe here. So if you're watching this, remember that you can watch on Twitch, or you can watch on the Associated Studios feed on Facebook, and you can get your questions into Facebook, or you can actually ask in Twitch chat, and we're going to be asking the questions as we go through. So get your questions in. We're going to be going for about 45 minutes-ish, an hour-ish. We'll see how it goes. So make sure you get your questions in. This is going to be such an interesting talk, I can tell you that right now, and I'm sure Anthony's going to have some really wonderful things to tell everybody. So make sure you get your questions in quickly, because we don't want a situation where we run out of time and we're not able to ask them. So get them in while you can. So welcome, Anthony. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to just start off just by, like I do with everybody, just to get you to just talk a little bit about what it is that you do and what people know you for.
I write lyrics. I've been writing lyrics now for 38 years with George Styles. And you know, as you know, the words that go with the music. I also occasionally write the book, which does sometimes confuse people because the book is not the underlying source material. It is the play into which the songs are embedded. Mm-hmm. And so with two or three of our shows, Just So and Honk, and our first ever show, Tutankhamun, I wrote the book as well as the lyrics. But in more recent years, I've worked with other collaborators, which I actually love because it means there's another brain in the room with George and I, and sometimes two brains. You know, with some of our shows, Betty Blue Eyes and Travels with My Aunt, we had a writing team of book writers who came in.
Yeah.
So, but that's what I do. I write. I think of myself primarily as a lyricist. Sometimes I write the book, and sometimes I even perform.
Wow.
And I direct. So I've done a bit of several disciplines.
Yeah. And what does it mean to be a lyricist? I know that sounds like a slightly ridiculous question, but like you know, when we've spoken to composers before, and kind of they've spoke a little bit about the kind of, you know, the weight on their shoulders to think about like style and all of that kind of stuff and whatever. But quite often, obviously, it's not a hard and fast rule. You know, we've spoken to the likes of Tim Rice, who worked with the wonderful Andrew Lloyd Webber, who wrote the music first. But what does it mean to be a lyricist for you, and how do you go about that process of engaging with that initially?
Well, I mean, when I started out in 1983, I was doing a degree in zoology, as a lot of people know. I wasn't doing anything to do with the arts, but I was very keen on theatre. And I'm from a very musical family. And my brother had been writing musicals when I was still at school down here in Kent. And I was in one of his school productions. So when I went to university, I thought, I'm going to see if I can get my brother's show put on. Well, it transpired the only way I could get his show put on was if I directed it myself. Mm-hmm. And I put the show on. And the following year, I met George at university. And we said, let's see if we can write a musical ourselves. Neither of us, I mean, George had done a degree in music, so at least he was trained in the right sort of idea. Whereas I could, you know, I knew how to dissect a dogfish, but I'd never written a lyric. I've literally never written a lyric before. I just love lyrics. I love comic poems like Spike Milligan. I used to love Flanders and Swan. I used to particularly love the final song on the Two Ronnies show, because it was usually based on something else, but with new lyrics. But the way that gags could land in a lyric, I loved. And so George and I said, let's have a go at writing, but we didn't know how to do it. So it was really a case of doing it instinctively. And the first show we wrote worked. I don't quite know how. And we were encouraged to keep going, and we've kept going, I say, for 38 years. But I do love wordplay. And, you know, I've made some great friends in the industry over the years, including Sondheim and Stephen Schwartz and Tim and Don Black. And it's like we're all cut from slightly similar cloth. We all have certain things in common, although we write in different styles. And for instance, I love doing crossword puzzles. I love doing Sudoku. Stephen Sondheim, I don't know whether he still does at the age of 92, but he
obsessed.
The set, the New York Times Christmas crossword, which is a really big one, because he just loves that whole working things out. And I've just been working on a new thing with Cameron and Cameron McIntosh. And sometimes it's a case of it's another, like, you know, George and I did half a Sixpence. It's like reinventing an old musical. So a lot of the groundwork has been done. And then it's just a jigsaw puzzle for me to start fitting in new ideas and tailoring an existing song into a slightly different setting sometimes. And I just love that. I love the fact that the English language is so rich. Sometimes we have taken up short when we go to a different country. Like, for instance, our Peter Pan was first produced in Denmark in Danish, just because we'd written it in English, obviously. It had won a competition in Denmark, and somebody saw it and said, we want to put it on. So it was immediately translated into Danish. And at that point, I came to realize that in Denmark, the Danish language only has 25% of the vocabulary that we have.
Of course,
we can say so many different things in so many different ways, and it's so nuanced. And I'm not just being very Anglophile in saying that. I think it's a fact about the English language and the history of the English language that has lots of very different nuanced ways of saying the same thing. You don't get that in every language.
Absolutely. I find it really, really fascinating how you're saying, you know, like, and I think it's quite an inspiring thing as well, you know, that you got together with George and kind of went, okay, let's just figure this out ourselves and really kind of like work from the ground up and just see what we come up with. You know, and I think lots of young writers and artists and performers sometimes don't see that side of it, of course, because, you know, they look at kind of like how kind of established people are, and they go, I just want that right away, you know, and you've kind of really worked from the ground up.
Television is, you know, partly to blame for that.
Absolutely.
Blame thing. The fact is, back in 1983, when George and I started out, there were very, very few people apparently doing what George and I wanted to do. There were Tim and Andrew, who, you know, by 1983 they'd had Superstar and Joseph, and Andrew had Cats in 1981. Tim had done Blondel, I think.
That's right.
But you know, they were fairly well established ever since they did Joseph. There was Howard Goodall, who was doing a lot of TV writing and then wrote The Hired Man. That was 85. But this was in the days before Les Mis and before Miss Saigon and before Phantom. And, you know, so it wasn't, I mean, what George always says is when he went to university to do music, he had never really thought that being a composer was a career option, because there were no role models doing what George now does out there, apart from Andrew and Tim, this side of the Atlantic. Over there, they've got Sondheim, and they've got Jerry Herman, and they've got, you know, a bunch of other people writing, Kander and Ed. But over in the UK, there was nobody. And I don't think it was just that they were doing it, but not sort of kind of getting anywhere. I think it was not at that point. Musicals were not as big then as they are now. And so, and you know, I'm on the board of the Mercury Musical Developments. We've got over 400 members, all trying to do what George and I have been doing for 38 years. And of course, you know, the market gets a bit flooded after a while. There's only so many theatres in the UK, and they're, you know, musicals are expensive things to put on. So we were feeling our way. We knew what we loved. We were inspired by Sondheim. It was seeing Sweeney Todd that made us say, let's write a musical together. But, you know, I like so many different styles of musical theatre writing. I always, you know, I quote Sweeney Todd as my favourite, partly because I've got such a soft spot for it, because it was the show that made me start writing. But I do love Sondheim musicals. You know, I love all of the Sondheim musicals. But I love Kander and Ebb, and I love Little Shop of Horrors, and I love Guys and Dolls, and I love My Fair Lady. You know, it's such a broad palette out there. I love Dear Evan Hansen. I love Come From Away. I love shows often more when they're written in a style that I know I couldn't personally do.
Yeah.
I appreciate the craft. And for instance, Come From Away, when I heard what it was about and I saw it on Broadway, and I thought, how on earth is that going to be a musical? And then, you come away with tears in your eyes, and it made me want to go to Gander in Newfoundland and meet these people and see this place where this amazing story happened.
Yeah.
So, but my dog wants to get in on the action.
Oh, do you know what? You win the industry talks pet competition so far, I feel like.
This is Sixpence, what I got when I was writing half a Sixpence.
Oh.
She doesn't know how lucky. If I'd been writing Honk at the time, it would have been a whole different story. But George and I, we always start with the story. We know that the most important thing is the story and the book and the development and the arc of the characters. And we work on that together. Nearly always we work on that together. I mean, not so much if it's with a different book writer. They might have come up with a synopsis or an idea and they've come to us and said, how about this? And we then have something to read. If we were starting something from the ground up, like we did with Just So, we will start planning how the story is going to be. Yeah. And we used to always do it on a great big scroll of paper where we'd, like an old piece of wallpaper, we'd roll it out down the garden. And at the top, we'd write Act 1, and we'd walk down about 20 feet, and we'd write interval, and we'd walk down another 15 feet and write the end.
Yeah.
And you just start filling it in. And it means you can walk up and down it and see what happens and when. And if you've got too many ballads too close together, you get a pair of scissors and you move it.
Yeah.
Or too many numbers together. But it means you sort of had a blueprint of what the show is going to be. And then George and I can both dive in. I can dive in lyrically and think I've got an idea for a song here, and he might come up with a musical theme for elsewhere. But my favorite way of working with George is when we've worked out what the song is, who's going to sing it, what it's going to be about, where it's going to get us from and to within the drama. And then I'll usually go off into my room, he'll go off into his room. I'll have a little noodle about a few ideas, maybe come up with a title, maybe come up with a chorus, give it to him. He might say, I really like it. He might say he hates it, but he might say, I really like it. But could you have another syllable in this line? Because I want musically it to echo something else that he's done. And then he might say, and now I want the verse to do this. And then he'll play me the verse and he'll give me a little MP3 of it. And then I start fitting the lyrics into that tune. And they sort of grow a little bit of me, a little bit of him, a little bit of me, a little bit of him. And I think in a way they're the most successful because they feel more organic.
Yeah, and the thing is, you can, it's because I'm obviously a singing teacher and a vocal coach and somebody that spends their life with this material often. And and some of the great partnerships, Rodgers and Hammerstein, and you can see that. You can see them influencing each other in those ways as you dive more and more into it. And you can see bits that you go, taking Rodgers and Hammerstein bits that were definitely Hammerstein, and bits that were definitely Rodgers. And then those bits where you can see where they were kind of coming together and compromising in a way because they adjust for each other. And those are the moments that often create magic. And I think that
I think the best examples of successful songwriting teams are when you can't imagine that piece of music without those words on it, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get that,
Yeah.
I've grown accustomed to her face. Don't cry for me, Argentina. You cannot think of that phrase without thinking of how the music goes at the same time.
Absolutely. So the questions have come rolling in. So this is really great. So Frankie,
they want to know.
I think I'm not. If anybody says anything about the dog, I'm not going to ask those questions because I want the dog first. So, Frankie says, "Thank you so much for speaking to us. I've loved your work growing up, especially Honk. She'd like to know about how you approach writing and what do you think the biggest challenge is when it comes to writing. But I'm going to change the question slightly. What was your biggest challenge when you started, and what do you find your biggest challenge is nowadays?"
My biggest challenge starting, when I started out, you mean?
Yeah.
Was probably, it was banging on people's doors. For the first 17 years of our careers, from when we decided we're going to become writers, for the first 17 years, we just about made a living. It was hand to mouth, but it was just about making a living until Honk went to the National and won the Olivier. And then suddenly everybody wanted to do Honk. And at that point, our life changed. And we knew it. It was a very, very tangible moment. In fact, I was in Times Square that autumn, because it was very, very late in the year that Trevor Nunn, who was then running the National, said, I want to do Honk. He had rung us and said, because I bombarded him with scripts over the years, and I'd sent him Honk, and he told us it had passed what he called the Volvo test, which meant the kids in the back enjoyed it and said, put it on again. But he hadn't done it. In fact, they'd never done a British musical at that point at the Nationals. That was not even on our radar. And Trevor rang up and said, look, I'm thinking about doing Honk for Christmas. And if I do, it will be with the ensemble who I've been working with all year, who are at the time were in Candide in the Olivier. So I went and saw Candide one night thinking, oh, well, he could play the ugly duck and he could play the bullfrog and she could be Mother Duck and whatnot. Went home in case there was a message on my answer phone. It was back in those days. And nothing. The next day it was on the Monday. That was on Friday. On the Monday, we got the call to say, yeah, they definitely want it. And I was going straight to New York for something. And I remember being in Times Square, and it's that time of year when they do Broadway on Broadway, it's called. And it's like our West End, what's that thing?
West End Live, yeah.
Like West End Live. It's just like that. And there was a guy, I think it was Howard McGillen, singing This Is the Moment from Jekyll and Hyde. And I'm standing in a crowd of about 10,000 people in Times Square, and I started crying because I was so aware that this was the moment. There'd never been a British musical at the National, let alone in the Olivier, and it just suddenly felt like we got something. I always used to say that our career felt like we're always climbing up a slope, and at any one time, bad review or whatever, we can be knocked right back to the bottom. Then Honk happened, and we had a ledge.
Yeah.
And they could never take that ledge away from us, which is why, winning an Olivier could never be as good again because it was so unexpected. But it means, we're climbing again, hopefully, but, we can't fall below the ledge. We've got a ledge now. But so the hardest part in the early days was really just getting our shows on and making a living and being able to not be too distracted by, I did a bit of bar work and George and I did a bit of interior decorating work, but it was a case of trying to get somebody to put our shows on. And, we're very lucky we met Cameron Mackintosh so early in our careers, and he's been so supportive throughout our entire career and still is. But that was the hardest part. And the challenge nowadays is, what would I say the big challenge nowadays is? It's getting your show in a timely fashion, and where, as George and I always say, where every member of the team is trying to do the same show. It's wonderful alchemy when, and half a Sixpence was a case in point. It was a total joy. Rachel Kavanagh, Andrew Wright, Paul Brown designing rather, Paulie Constable lighting, discovering Charlie Stem.
Oh, what a wonderful discovery. Yeah, absolutely.
And we just all knew what we were doing. I mean, I remember Cameron sent me a card on the first night. He said he couldn't believe that there was hardly a rewrite. Everything I did went into the show. And it's because we all, I always say it's like having on an old vinyl record, sometimes the needle used to skid across the tracks.
That's right, yeah.
Sometimes it goes in the groove. And I said, it just felt like the needle went in the groove on this one, and we all did the same show. So that's blissful when that happens. And it doesn't always 100% happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think, oh, that didn't quite work, and that didn't quite feel like it belonged. So I think that's the hardest part, really. I mean, as you probably know, George had a stroke about 18 months ago.
That's right.
Our challenge now is getting the shows on that we had finished or had almost finished before he had the stroke, because he can't at the moment use his left hand at all. So, and he's left-handed. Yeah. So it's been such a, when it happened, it was such a huge blow. Yeah. Because he was like paralyzed all the way down his left side. Yeah. And he's left-handed, so he couldn't he can't play the piano. He's just started, because his hand is, he's still not moving, but he's just started with his right hand writing some piano nocturnes where he can write the right hand with the right hand, and then he writes the left hand with the right hand. Yeah. It's just taking him a long time, but it's something he's always wanted to do, and it's making that part of his brain tick over. So it's I haven't heard them yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it's so nice to see that he's doing so much better now as well. So
yeah, I mean, he
really may even
is.
be watching this, because he's actually he's one of my Facebook friends. So if you're watching, George, we're sending you all the love. So
he's doing well. He's so dedicated to his therapy sessions and his sessions and whatnot. It's hard to see somebody who was the most vibrant and ebullient person I've ever met in my life suddenly knocked out
Yeah.
I've always described George as being the front foot and me as being the back foot, and now I'm sort of having to be both feet, and
Yeah.
it's been a few different plates, So it's a
Yeah.
very, very, that and COVID and Brexit is a
Mm-hmm.
very, very strange.
And I guess my question then is like, given all of that stuff that you've just said, and you said like 17 years going hand to mouth and really kind of knocking on doors all the time, how did you keep yourself and each other kind of engaged and inspired and feeling like you could
Well,
continue?
I think it's two things. I feel like George and I have grown up together as writers. It's not as if one, and I love what Tim and Andrew do, but I sort of felt that after Evita, they started going off in different directions at different speeds. Tim wanted to do a lot of cricket. Andrew wanted to write cats. George and I we've stayed together as a team for such a long time that I think we both inspire one another. We both make one another laugh still. And we both believed in what we were doing, I think, so strongly that we weren't going to give up. And there were times when it was harder than others, I suppose, when my parents were saying things like, so how long do you give it? And in the early days, it's when you're going to get a proper job. I went through all of that.
Yeah.
We 100% believed in what we were doing. And we also, within that 17 years, we did some TV work. We were on New Faces, which was like X Factor of its day.
Right, yeah.
And we did New Faces, and we got into the final doing like Flanders and Swan comedy songs. And although we didn't win the final, we were on it with Joe Pasquale, actually. It was hysterical. It was won by a ventriloquist, who I don't think anyone's ever heard of since. But what it did was it put us into a different forum. And somebody also from Central TV saw the rushes of our episodes and booked us for a 3-month TV series live on lunchtime. It was ITV's equivalent of Pebble Mill at 1, if you remember what that was. And we were on every single Friday live doing a song that had to be based on something that happened in the news that week.
Brilliant.
As topical as possible. So the later you left it in the week, the more topical it was, but the less time we had to actually learn it, because we had to do it then on live on TV. So we used to write our own camera scripts for that because it saved time. And so I knew if it was on me, if it was on George, if it was a wide shot on both of us, which gave us a lot of money. And also, it made us have to write quickly, which was very good training in a way. I mean, I guess it was 13 episodes. I think by episode 7, I was thinking, we're getting a bit formulaic now with these comedy series.
Yeah.
But it was very good training, and it's come in subsequently, because sometimes when you're in previews for a show and with someone like Cameron, you get the note, we need a new chorus, we need a new verse, we need a new something. And it happened on Half a Sixpence. The show had been running all summer in Chichester, came into London, we're in previews, and Cameron went to George one day, I wasn't even in the building, and said, I think the song, which was called Back the Right Horse, needs a chorus. And George rang me and said, Cameron wants a chorus to go into this song. I said, but the song's played all summer in Chichester. What's the chorus going to be about? It's like it was already a complete song. So I went in, and Cameron was telling us what he thought. It needed to be about the joy of the theatre. And so, funny enough, it was being filmed that day. There was somebody backstage with a camera filming everything to show Cameron at work. And it looks like it's fake, but it wasn't. George came up with a tune based on Joy of the Theatre. I went up into this dressing room. I said, I get it. Okay. Could be, the Joy of the Theatre. Da, 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 da. Within half an hour, we'd written it. And we went and got Cameron. It looks like it's all staged. It was for real. But it was good training. That TV thing, that TV job was very good training.
Yeah, that's really great. It's really good for especially our performing students to really hear that, because you can, you find your training in the work that you do, not just at the school that you go to, and I think kind of all of those experiences kind of amalgamate to become the artist that you are. And I think that's really, really obvious from what you're saying, which is really lovely.
I'll tell you who that was hardest on, not me or George. It was hardest on the actor, who had to then go on stage and sing the song sung all summer in Chichester, now with a new chorus thrown into it. And he did a great job. Ian Bartholomew, he's just been on Coronation Street and was great on that as well. But because he was playing a playwright in Half a Sixpence, I said, look, just have the script. Have the script as a prop and write the key lines on it. And then when you want that safety blanket taken away from you, we'll take it away from you. But at least you've got something which down on stage. Because it's very hard when you've been, I say he'd sung the old song all summer. He'd been teching the old song, and now suddenly in front of a live audience, you've got a new bit of that old song. A new choreography. It's a big
it's a huge ask. Yeah, absolutely. Lisa's got a question here, which kind of harks back to something you were saying actually about working in Danish. She says, "Hi Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I actually saw Soho Cinders when it was on recently at the Charing Cross Theatre and loved it so much. Since your work has been translated into many different languages as well, what are the things that you notice about the differences between productions when the work gets translated? Does it ever influence the way that you create the piece?"
It doesn't. That last bit, the answer is no. It doesn't affect that. When it's a big production that's being done, like Mary Poppins, when it's done in if it was first done in Dutch, and then it was done in Japanese, and Cameron and Disney always put me in touch with the local translator, so that, and sometimes it's the same translator who does the lyrics as does the book. And sometimes it's two different people. In fact, in Japan, Mary Poppins, it was a different book translator to the lyric translator, because it's a slightly different skill set.
Yeah.
And they put me in touch with the person who's going to translate the lyrics, and they will then bounce ideas off me if they can't find an exact way of saying what I'd said lyrically and making it rhyme. Mm-hmm. Which is sometimes hard. Like, for instance, in Peter Pan, which was done in Danish, my song for Peter when he teaches the kids how to fly is called Neverland, and Peter's, which I love the twist on it, but the idea was that the way to fly is to never land. Well, never land, as in impossible to alight, doesn't have the same double meaning as it does in Danish. And so they call it Drømmelund, which is like dreamland, and Tinkerbell is Klokkeblomst, and Captain Hook is Captain Claw.
Yeah.
Peter Pan, the inflection was different. But, all we ever say when this happens is, look, if it works for you and for your audience, then put it in. Because I don't know.
I lived in Japan for a year, so I actually saw Mary Poppins when it was on there. Wow. I saw the Japanese production, and I've also saw it in Holland as well, because I work out in the Netherlands a lot. Wow. And I love some of the when I go, because I don't speak a word of Japanese or Dutch, but I love going with my friends that do. And my favorite one was Billy Elliot. So they had exactly this problem with the song Electricity, because the song and the word in Dutch doesn't translate well at all. It doesn't have the same meaning, the same double meaning of that feeling through your body, all of this kind of stuff. And it certainly didn't fit into the lyrics at all. So the word they use is chicken skin. So the song has gone from electricity to chicken skin. Yeah.
Is that like Goose Temple?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the wrong number of syllables too.
Yeah, exactly.
A word like electricity has a very specific number of syllables.
Yeah.
It may just mean it. No, I judge the success of a translation by sitting there in the audience and getting the same feeling that I get when it's in English.
Yeah.
If the audience are responding and laughing and crying, at the same sort of time. And in Japan, it's slightly different because they're a bit more reserved as an audience. They tend to, I directed Honk in Japan with Stephen Mear choreographing it, and it was the first time Stephen had ever choreographed the show, and they're not a riotous audience. They laugh by going, and then at the end they might give you like very regimented 5 or 6 claps, but at the end they went absolutely crazy and they wouldn't leave the building. But Stephen Mear came to me and he said, "Oh my God, I've killed your show." But he hadn't at all. It's just that they weren't responding in the way that I told him that the audiences normally did.
Yeah.
But it's a great joy to see your work translated into different languages. And, Honk done an awful lot in other languages, and it's down to Hans Christian Andersen, not me. It's his story that resonates with all these audiences around the world. We've just put some songs in it, really.
Incredibly talented and modest, everybody.
Yes.
But wonderful. It's so nice, and I'm so thankful for that success that you have had, because like these, we think of you guys, as some of like our top kind of British exports in musical theatre. You know, real like the real kind of like real British musical theatre, and for the world to embrace it in the way that we do, I think is a really beautiful thing.
No, it's,
So it's really, really
a
nice.
very exciting
Yeah.
thing. And it's surprising sometimes. It's like Betty Blue Eyes was done in Wichita, Kansas. Well, it's such a British story, which such British sensibilities again, and British humour. You know, it's Alan Bennett. And to see that work in a very big space in Wichita was amazing.
Yeah.
I saw it in Linz in Austria a couple of years ago with George, and that was also amazing. In a great big like opera house, but they were doing Betty Blue Eyes, a little puppet pig.
Yeah, I love that. It was great. We've got loads more questions, so I'm going to get through some of them.
All right.
No, it's all right. No, it's okay. I could literally talk all day. So this is from Reese, and Reese says, given that you've explored shows from several different disciplines and no doubt have an eye for how components blend together, which you've already touched on, I was wondering if you've ever noticed exploring different aspects of life in that way. I practice lyric writing as a sort of therapeutic activity, but also I cook, and I find exploring new flavors and methods of cooking, it can be compared to the perfect balance that incredible creators like yourself strives for in putting on a show. So how does writing lyrics, how do you find yourself kind of being a lyricist in your life other than writing lyrics for shows?
I like painting. I do oil painting. I do charcoal. I love doing charcoal drawings.
Lovely.
That's a very new thing for me. I love cooking. I've got a beautiful garden here. I love gardening. I think I'd hate to go a day to go by when I feel like I haven't achieved something. And in the same way that if I'm writing, I hate a day to go by when I've still got a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
There's something about that creative, whatever it is, a gene, whatever it is, that makes you have to do something. George was talking about, we did a TV thing last week, and he was saying, I think writers have to write. And it's true, but it doesn't stop you from being inspired by other experiences. I love playing tennis. I love walking. I've got a beautiful dog. I walk Sixpence around the fields every day. I like to keep myself busy. I like television.
Yeah.
I like reading. I've been trying to write some children's stories recently.
Oh, lovely.
Lockdown. You know, lockdown has been tough for everybody, of course, but I'm very lucky in that I couldn't get any money from the government, but I'm lucky in that I've got a bit of a reserve from having Poppins on in various places. Mm-hmm. I don't have to think, you know, like poor Anna Jane Casey, who came and delivered something for Deliveroo on my front doorstep. And, you know, the leading lady from the West End. Yeah. I was lucky from that point of view. But it does make you think about I think a lockdown situation does make you think about what you love to do and who you really are and what defines you, and why you're not going to let an external force like this stop you from achieving those. And if it's planting a new rhododendron, it's planting a new rhododendron. If it's doing an oil painting, it's doing an oil painting. I have been writing. I've literally yesterday finished a brand new musical based on an old musical, which hopefully will be on the autumn after this coming one. That's
exciting. That's very exciting. Wonderful. Okay, so Kim has asked, when you were saying there about, about how you, you don't like a day to go by if you like, writers need to write. So like if you were having one of those days where perhaps you weren't kind of necessarily able to find the words, perhaps, where do you find your inspiration from?
Well, you of course you do get writer's block, and I often find myself when I'm walking the dog in the morning coming up with ideas. I've got an idea for a new show, and I literally started singing because no one can hear me down here in Kent. Just got fields. I start singing tunes as well as lyrics, or I never do. I don't write the music at all. But if it gets to a point when I get very frowsily headed if I'm sitting there for too long with a blank sheet of paper and nothing's coming. In that case, I will go and make a cake, or I'll go for a walk, or I'll go and do some gardening. These are all lockdown things. It's not like I can't do these things when I'm up in London, but luckily I've been locked down in Kent for the whole of the for a year now. It's still crazy. I made jam, I made marmalade. I'll find something to do. Literally, I made marmalade. I didn't know it took 4 hours, but I made marmalade like before last.
Yep.
It's a long process.
I know it always takes much longer than you think, doesn't it? I'm a bit of a baker myself, so I know exactly what you mean. That's really great. Kaya asks, this is actually a really good question. When performers sing your songs, what are the key pointers that you would give them in order for them to do them justice and align with your vision?
Well, that's interesting because I came to the Riverside studio for Leontine and did a day, it felt like a day. I did a session with a whole bunch of students several years ago where they just sang Styles and Rouge songs, and I would pull them apart and put back together again and say, this is what I was thinking when I wrote that. So, I mean, it's always interesting to start with, just to keep your mouth shut and listen to what a student or a performer is doing with your material, because it doesn't mean it's not valid if they've found something different in it that is personal to them and they're conveying that rather than necessarily what I meant it to be within the context of the musical. So that can sometimes be actually rather inspiring to see people get something slightly different out of, even out of a lyric, just to, it means something different. It's got a double meaning. But I will usually, like George and I did this TV thing on Friday actually, and they brought in 2 performers, and the boy sang, he's called Billy Nevers, and I think he's in And Juliet.
I know Billy. I taught him at Italia Conti when he was younger.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, Billy sang a song from Peter Pan. He sang There's Always Tomorrow. And another girl called Jodie Beth sang Wait a Bit from Just So. And George and I were with our face masks on, sitting at the back of the auditorium because they wanted us to stay and see what they did with them. And they were filming each one 2 or 3 times. And I couldn't not speak. So I took my mask off and I said to Jodie Beth, just put a comma in there because you're linking 2 thoughts together. Put a comma in there and a breather. And then it was like, he made me feel I can soar. Now only one thing seems sure. I'll have to wait a bit more. And she was singing right through. He made me feel I could soar. Now only one thing seems. And I just said, it's a different thought. This elephant in the story, but this boy in life, he made me feel I was very special. Oh, but now he's not with me anymore. So just put a comma in there. So, it depends what the situation is. If they come to audition for me and we ask them to sing the song twice, I might give them some notes on my intention if I think what they're doing is going so against that it's losing the meaning a little bit.
Yeah.
But this was a different case in point. It just happened to be two people who were singing on this TV show, and there was a break before they did the second take, and I thought I'll just mention that little comma that goes in there.
Yeah, I love that.
What I don't like is if someone sings one of our songs and they get it wrong, if they've learnt it wrong, or if they've got the music slightly wrong, or they've got the wrong word. And I just think that's a bit sloppy.
Yeah.
I don't mind if it's not the best performance in the world, but at least if you're going to go to the trouble of learning the song, then learn the song.
Yeah, do the work.
And approximate to it,
100%. Well, all my students that are sitting watching this know that's exactly how I operate anyway. Yeah, you can't approximate anything in my studio. Absolutely not.
Right. You sweat over every crotchet and every syllable. So
exactly.
I guess you sort of hope that people are going to realise that.
Do you know what? I'm so thankful you said that, because I literally say this and I think people don't believe me. And I'm like, no. I say to people all the time, I said, there's no such thing as a mistake in a well-written piece of music. I said, because these people have literally sat and thought about every single instruction that they've put on that page, every capital letter, like you say, every comma. You need to observe that first. Break the rules all you like, but only once you understand what the rules are in the first place.
Sometimes always is God is in the detail.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what we do. That's our job, is to put the detail in and then the performer.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a question from Twitch. This is amazing. Thank you so much for your time. And this is from Iona. Oh my goodness, Iona, how are you doing? I've not seen you in many years. Do you have any advice for someone starting the journey into being a lyricist? And do you know if there's any schemes that help match writers to composers? I actually before you answer this, Anthony, I get loads and loads of people who have come to me over the years and said, I'm a composer, like I'm looking for a lyricist, or vice versa. And it's one of these things. It's actually a very, very common question that I get as a teacher in drama schools, and for people that want to kind of follow your path. What advice would you give them?
Well, I mean, George and I were very, very lucky because we met at university, and it's like Alan Menken and Howard Ashman meeting up very early on, Canner and Ebb. Some people, that's luck. You're in the right place at the right time, you meet the right person, there's a bond, it happens. There are schemes, and George and I are on the board of Mercury Musical Developments, which now has over 400 members, and all of those 400 members are either composers, lyricists, or book writers. And they're all, if they're not already in a team, they're all trying to do like speed dating and find someone who they can work with. And George and I get sent a lot of shows to read. And in fact, I'm wading through the 9 at the moment because we do this mentorship scheme every other year. And for instance, this year, we asked people they have to submit a first draft of their musical. And the most common comment I write is, you need to find a collaborator. Because if, Sondheim is a bit of one-off, but even Sondheim has book writers.
Yeah.
To try, and Bill Finn, William Finn does it too. He pretty much writes book, music, and lyrics. If you try and do all three, I always say one of them is going to be the weakest discipline, and it's going to show. So if you're really good at lyrics, but you're not great at dialogue and at structuring a scene, then get a book writer to do that.
Yeah.
And if you're a great composer and you think you can get away with a few rhymes, doesn't mean you're a lyricist. I think the most successful musicals come out of collaboration, because writing musicals is such a collaborative process, and the whole way down the line. And it's not just you and your writing partner, it's then you and your writing partner and the director and the choreographer and the actor and the orchestra and the lighting designer, and it becomes this great big family. I say, and if you're lucky, everyone's trying to do the same show. Mm-hmm. So the biggest advice I ever gave young writers is try and find a collaborator. So if you're a composer, try and find a lyricist. And organizations like Mercury Musical Developments, they do these sort of clinics where they try and bring people together. And if you have an idea for a musical, it can go on their Facebook notice board and say, I've got this great idea, I'm looking for a composer. Or I've got a great idea for a musical, I need a lyricist to write the lyrics. And there's another organization called Book Music Lyrics, which is run by David James, and they meet, I think it's a 2-year course. You probably have to exchange money for that one, because it's like an intensive course. But again, it puts people together. Stephen Flaherty and Lynn Ahrens were brought together to a scheme like that, run by BMI in America. They were attending this sort of like a Book Music Lyrics in London, and they met up, and they went off and do great things together.
That's amazing.
Find a collaborator. And also, whatever your idea is for a musical, you need to be absolutely in love with that idea, because from soup to nuts, from the beginning to, from when you have the idea to when it might even get a workshop, can take 2 or 3 years. So you need to still be loving it in 2 or 3 years' time. It can't just be, oh, let's find a Charles Dickens novel that hasn't been done yet, or, let's try and do Harry Potter the musical or something, which we won't get the rights to anyway.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Great, wonderful. There's a couple more questions. I'll ask them very, very quickly. So this comes from our student Anna. She asks, she'd like to ask how the experience of taking a class. It's very interesting what you've just said, actually. Taking a classic like Mary Poppins and writing new things and putting it on a stage. Like, is there kind of an added pressure with that? Like, does that process differ from when, for instance, doing something like Just So?
Well, I mean, to be honest, the biggest difference with that was that we knew it was going to go on. With Just So, it was a speculative thing that we'd come up with the idea, and we thought, well, let's write a musical based on Kipling's stories and see if someone likes it. Poppins, it was Disney and Cameron. It took a long, long time. We were first told about interest in us in 1994, beginning of 1994. We were told by another producer that our names were being bandied about as possible writers for Mary Poppins, and our initial reaction was, why do they need other writers? A, the film was chock full of songs, and B, they're both still alive still, the Sherman brothers. Yeah. Well, they were then. That was in 1994. We wrote Practically Perfect as a pitch to send to Cameron, and it was in the days of cassettes. We wrote the song, we recorded it with Claire Moore singing it and doing a Julie Andrews impersonation. George and I played Jane and Michael Banks, and we just left it on Cameron's desk and said, look, we've heard our names are being bandied about, we want the job. And he loved it, and he said, well, can you write me another one? Because I need now to persuade Disney that you two guys are the guys to write the songs for it. So we wrote another song called Ever So Mary Poppins, which never featured in the stage show, to show Willing. But we didn't know what the story was going to be. We didn't know how they were going to turn this film with lots of animation in it into a stage show. Mm-hmm. We then had to wait about 8 years. And during that 8 years period, Cameron had met Pamela Travers because she was still alive then. He met her in the last 2 or 3 years of her life. And he took her a cherry tree as a gift. And he won her over. And she got to trust him. And one of her stipulations was, if this ever does go to the stage, Cameron, I want new songs to be written by British writers, because she objected to the Americanization of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's go fly a kite. She said, we wouldn't say that. We'd say, let's go and fly a kite. So she had very strong opinions. I never met her. I heard her. I've heard her on recording of her talking.
Well, she was a very fearsome character, from what I hear.
She was Mary Poppins. Yeah. And so, if she said, oh no, Mary wouldn't say that, and she thinks she is Mary Poppins, you can't really argue with that. Yeah. But Cameron's masterstroke, in a way, was persuading her to use the songs from the Disney film, because he said, there's absolutely no point in putting this thing on stage without the Sherman Brothers songs in it. And so she agreed to it, and she trusted Cameron. And then, we were asked if we'd be interested in 94. The show opened in 2004, 10 years later. And we only really got the green light in about 2002, by which time Julian Fellows had been brought on board, because he'd won his Oscar for Gosford Park, and suddenly Disney wanted the Oscar winner. Mm-hmm. We kicked Simba's butt in the Oliviers with Honk, because we beat the Lion King, so they wanted them as well. So suddenly it was like a done deal. We were going to be the writers for it. Yeah. So, in answer to the question, it was no different. It was just a case of, we had a very good, very detailed outline of a story that between Tom Schumacher and Cameron and Julian we'd been presented with. Sometimes it included ideas for where new songs might go. Sometimes it included slots where songs from the film would go, but which were going to need to be rewritten to make them tie with the book. So I suppose the most daunting one was Supercalifragilistic, because everyone knew it so well. Yeah. And I was really reinventing it. George wrote a counter melody for Jolly Holiday, so that made it into a big production number, because you had two tunes that came together. And Step in Time is kind of nearly all new lyrics, but starting with the never need a reason, never need a rhyme. The Step in Time is the only bit I kept of it, really. Mm-hmm. But it sort of grew, and you don't get daunted by situations like that. You just have to get on with it. And I say the big difference was, we knew it was going to happen, because it was Disney and Cameron Mackintosh, and how could that not eventually end up on stage?
Yeah, that must be a really nice position to be in, actually. Very kind of,
It was lovely. And I have to say, the Sherman Brothers, who were huge heroes of mine, because when we got asked to do it, I'd never seen Mary Poppins when we got asked to do this job. I knew all the songs, because everyone knows all the songs, because you hear them on Disney Time and things on TV. But I'd never sat down and watched the film before. But I did love The Jungle Book. And I did love Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which they didn't do with Disney, they did with Warner Brothers. Yeah. And I remember where I was, I must have been about 6 when Walt Disney died, and The Jungle Book had just come out. And we were outside the newsagents in my village in Kent, where I was brought up. And my dad, front of the Telegraph, said, Walt Disney's died. And I remember crying, because I thought that means there's going to be no more cartoons. Yeah. And there was one more, it was the Aristocats, which he'd overseen, but really The Jungle Book was the last one he had done.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I loved their music, and it was a great joy to meet them and to befriend them. And sadly Robert died, but Dick and Elizabeth are still out there in Hillcrest in LA.
That's right. Yeah. And I know Bobby as well as Robert's son. Just wonderful energy and great stories. Growing up with with
and the grandfather Al was also a composer.
Yeah, and incredible.
Such a dynasty, really.
Incredible, yeah, really wonderful. Tamara asks very, very quickly, my question is, do you have any tips or is it in particular you look for when someone's... Oh, no, we've already had that question, sorry. Do you have any advice for actors working on your shows and specific details people may sometimes miss out on when they're working on like well-known shows? Like, is there any specific notes that you feel actors always get, you know, that perhaps like just things that they've missed or things that they don't quite incorporate right away until kind of they've been made aware of it?
I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to think that. I mean, the thing is, when you're a writer, you basically, you hand your baby over to the director, especially in professional theatre. You hand it over to the director. It's then their, when they said their funeral, it's then their baby to look after. And you assume they're going to put the show on in a way that they've got some sort of vision for, that they will themselves convey to the actors. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't be George's and my place to intervene in that. In fact, I remember in 1990 when we did Just So at the Tri-School Theatre with the late Mike Ockland, who was a great friend of mine. And at one point, I think one of the actors had got a word wrong or something. And I was very green at that point to professional theatre. And I just got up and went and gave him the right word. And as I turn around, I'm coming back to where we were all sitting with Mike and Anthony Van Larsen. And Mike did this. He said, "What did you go and say to him?" And I said, "I just told him he got the words wrong." He said, "You do it through me. You do it through me." And I've never done that again since. I just know that when you're in that room, the king is not the writer; it is the director who's got to command the respect, apart from anything else, of his entire team. And so you wait until the director has had their vision and put it up, and then when you can see the whole picture, you can go to the director, and it might be that the actor or the actress in question comes over, and you say, actually, this is not quite the meaning of that moment. And sometimes it's that it goes against what the director thought it was, and what he has then gone further down that road with, and you have to take a few steps back and say, oh no, this is what that means. And this is who I'm referring to by him or she or it or whatever it is. And that, that's an error. But I rarely, sometimes I direct my own things. I've directed Honk and Just So now. And the kids' shows that they've written, I've directed. Mm-hmm. So I am then the only person who has the opinion at the time in the room. And the funny thing is, if George comes up to me and starts trying to give me, I say, shh, not now.
How funny. Yeah, I love that. I just want to I say again, thank you so much for this conversation. I have had an absolute wonderful time speaking to you today, and I'm sure everybody that's been watching has had a great time as well. I hope I answered enough questions. I feel like I once you start me on something, I go off down that road. Do you know what? Like you absolutely. You've answered everything that I'm sure people could want, and a whole lot more. But we'll try and get you back on again, because I think there's going to be a million, as is always the case with these things. People go away and tomorrow they go, I really wish I'd asked Anthony that question. So maybe we can try and get you on again, because
but just as a general, if people are out there thinking I want to have a go at writing a musical, there are these schemes out there, and the best thing is to come up with a really strong idea that you're absolutely in love with, and ideally find a collaborator who might share your passion for it, and then you just start,
Absolutely. And what I'm going to do is after this as well, I'm going to put the links for Mercury Musical Development and the other one as well, and in the thing, so people can follow them as well, because I think it's really, really great advice. Everybody's saying thank you very much. They're very, very grateful. And I'm really grateful as well. Good luck with all of your projects coming up. I cannot wait to see what you come up with next. And hopefully we'll maybe even get you back into Associated Studios again. It's not at Riverside Studios now. We've got a new wonderful home in Latimer Road, so you'll be able to maybe pop down there at some point when COVID's over.
I know Leo has tried me a few times. And I haven't been out country or COVID's intervened or something.
Absolutely, but we're going to keep trying because we would love for you to come in and work with the students.
In actual fact, I've kept in touch with nearly all of those students.
Oh wow!
I met with in Riverside. Yeah, there's one out in New York who I see, and there was Amy Cook Hodgson, I think her surname is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
There was a bunch of them I've kept in touch with, because, you know, it's so easy to now.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Anyway, thank you very, very much. Send my love to George, and send my love to your dog as well. Yeah. And and have a lovely, lovely evening. Thank you so much, George.
My pleasure.
It's been my pleasure as well. Thank you. Just want to say to everybody, thank you so much for coming and listening to Industry Talks. We're going to be back next week. I can't remember off the top of my head who it is, but we're going to put it up on the industry thing on Facebook. If Alex is watching this, I'm sure Alex will put it up in the chat. Who's next? Is it? I don't want to say because I'll get it wrong. It might be Nikki Snelson. It might be Bill Deemer. It'll be somebody amazing. We have somebody amazing next week. I can say that absolutely for certain. And I just want to say thank you very much for tuning in. If you are not a member of Associated Studios, but you would like to come and take part or do your postgrad in musical theatre, or even if you don't have a postgrad but you want some musical theatre training, we run full and part-time courses. I'm just going to put up the little advertisement now very quickly. In musical theatre performance. So if you want to work with incredible people, like me, of course, because I'm clearly incredible, joke, and or people like the incredible Anthony Drewe, who we could potentially get to come in at some point. I'm going to hold on to that. Then that would be wonderful. Just get in touch with us at www.associatedstudios.co.uk, or if you want to ask us any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us at info@associatedstudios.co.uk. And yeah, I will see you all very soon for the next chat next week. So take care, everybody, and have a lovely, lovely week.
You were like a ransom note. If I give in, will you come home? I put everything I had into getting you back. I was only 17, and you were the air I breathed. I walked across the burning bridge for you, for you. Those roads we walked, I'll know forever. Those times we talked, I still remember. Is it not enough that I played with my heart once, twice? If I'm blind to who you are, which of us was behind bars? Were you worth the price I paid? Your ransom. I tried to find a way to justify missing the signs I knew. My hands were tied the moment we met, and there was more to you. You were only 17, and I was your sixth release. A hostage on a silver plate to you, to you. Those roads we walked, I'll know forever. Those times we talked, I still remember. Is it not enough that I paid with my heart once, twice? If I'm blind to who you are, which of us was behind bars? Is it not